This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benneroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening? Who are the newsmakers? What's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world, and all you little websites out there. Your days may be numbered. John Bailey with Peter Katz, the anchor for all seasons, and Jim Benneroff is on assignment tonight. Here are the headlines. Summertime swaggers in with 90-degree heat. Mr. and Mrs. White Plains pass a $214.1 million school budget. 86% vote yes. The governor announces a $20 billion affordable housing plan. Because of what the FCC is now doing on net neutrality, websites like White Plains Citizen Net Reporter may not afford to exist in the very near future. Metro North train derails on the Rye Station curve, 12 injured. Driver jumps sidewalk in Times Square, kills 1, injures 30. And Jack Harrington, the conservation pioneer in White Plains, departs at 97. Also, the Hindenberg disaster is remembered. Westchester County passes a harsh opioid law. Peter Katz will update you as President Trump takes a European swing on Trump the President. Another quiet week, right, Peter? Nothing to worry about. Roger Ailes, the communications giant of our time, dies suddenly at 77. Playland prepares to open this weekend, and Percy Granger house is officially dedicated at reception on Cromwell Place. We'll give you a sample of White Plains' own musical legends' work at the end of the program. And now, Peter, let's jump to the Rolo Newsreel March of Time.
Indeed.
And there it was. That was Rye Town Beach out at next to Playland yesterday.
That was on Wednesday.
Right.
And the temperature did indeed get into the 90s.
Yeah.
Some places had 96 degrees, breaking the old record of 90 degrees for this day. It's supposed to get a little cooler over the weekend. But this all fits the pattern, or the crazy pattern that we've been seeing, just radical changes in the weather from day to day. And many people attribute that to global warming and all of the extra energy that's being pumped into the atmosphere.
Well, it was quite welcome after that dreary spring. Now, let's go to the news of the week that really directly affects you, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, and that was the school budget vote. And it was another landslide.
Okay, the slide says $414 million. It actually is $214 million. Pardon the error in the graphic. Right. But it did pass by 86%, and once again, there was a very low turnout. Of all the thousands and thousands of registered voters here in White Plains, only about 800 people turned out to vote in the school budget. There were two people running unopposed for re-election to the school board.
Yeah, Randy Stein and Rosemarie Eller, re-elected against no opposition, and it was a real sweep across the city, and as you can see, big vote there down Ridgeway.
I have a confession to make. I didn't vote in the school board election this time because I just couldn't. They don't open the polls until 9. I had to be at work at 8:45. And by the time I got home, the polls were closed. So this is what happens, number one, if you hold elections in May. Number two, if you have limited hours, for voting. And number three, if you have limited places to vote, you have very low turnouts.
Well,
that's what we've seen year after year in White Plains. Nothing, and other school districts for that matter. Nothing to convince anyone that they're going to change this to try to encourage more voter participation.
Right.
So what are you going to do?
Right. Well, the superintendent, the interim superintendent of schools, attributed this to a very good communications job. When he said he arrived in the district, he determined, first of all, that the district was in good shape, it was in great financial condition, and he decided we could do things. And we gave them things to vote yes for, which is a very good line.
That's what he said. That's what Dr. Smith said.
That's right. Okay. And it was and we can back up, we can show you how the actual budget affects you. Back one slide. Nope. Next slide. There you go. Here we go, $214 million, and that is a 2.58% increase in the entire budget. Now, what does that mean? It means a tax increase of 1.75%, and the rate per $1,000 goes from $615 to $626 for the medium-priced home in White Plains. My tax would go from $10,142 to $10,319, up $177.
And even if you rent an apartment, it affects you because the landlord pays school taxes on that, and eventually the school taxes are passed along to you, the renter. So everyone pays.
Now, very big story coming out of Albany yesterday.
You can say that again, and it sort of took a lot of people by surprise. But what happened was that yesterday, May 18th, Governor Cuomo signed a plan to launch a $20 billion 5-year program, which they say will combat homelessness and advance the construction of affordable housing in New York State. There's $2.5 billion in capital funding in the new budget to right now start the creation and preservation of more than 110,000 units of affordable and 6,000 units of supportive housing over the next 5 years. New York City will get a huge chunk of the money, more than $7 billion, but there will be money for the rest of the state. There was no breakdown
White Plains here. White Plains
no breakdown on what might be available for Westchester and more specifically White Plains. There was a heavy union presence for the bill signing ceremony in Manhattan. Anyone thinking of running against Cuomo for governor next time around got at least one clue as to who's a Cuomo supporter when Gary LaBarbera, president of the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York, got up to speak. Cuomo will follow.
Unlike many others, the governor realizes that it is not mutually exclusive to build affordable housing and build it union with good wages and benefits. That's the leadership that we have in Governor Cuomo. And while today is an historic day regarding this $20 billion plan, as well as this bill that will be signed today, I would be remiss before I leave this podium not to acknowledge Governor Andrew Cuomo for what he has done for this state and this city with his Build to Lead program. A new LaGuardia Airport, a new Javits, a new Penn Farley, Sheridan Expressway. Brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. It's tens of billions of dollars that are going to create tens of thousands of union construction jobs. And it's because of this man, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
I was HUD Secretary, Housing and Urban Development under Bill Clinton, building housing all across the country, new public housing. We made such a mistake with public housing. We built ghettos in this country. We wanted to take care of the poor. People wanted to do it as quickly as possible, so they built this high concentration, high density of all this housing in one area, no services, no transportation. And you literally built a ghetto. And then we had to go back and figure it out. But housing is the building block of society. Housing is the building block of family. Housing is the building block of community. And housing, at its most basic, providing shelter, is safety for individuals and for families. Today we announce a $20 billion housing program. What does that mean? That is the largest housing program in the history of the state of New York. That's what a $20 billion housing program is. And it is a comprehensive program. It has affordable housing so that working families can actually afford to live in the city that they work. It has funding so that we can redo the vacant buildings that are pulling down so many communities, housing funds to stop the foreclosures that are happening over and over and over again, and it has $7 billion to help the homeless and provide shelters and run shelters and let people lead different lives.
Now, again, we don't know just how much might be available for White Plains or Westchester. That'll certainly come out in the not-too-distant future. But affordable housing has been an issue that Westchester County Executive Rob Astorino has been facing for years now, and there's been speculation that he might run against Cuomo. So will Cuomo try to use this $20 billion plan to outmaneuver Astorino on the issue, should he run?
Well, he has.
Well, stay tuned.
Right.
We'll see.
But this may finally get Winbrook's rebuild going again. It
well,
may.
we know that
They
that
are
sort
so
of
10 years, one building.
That has
10 years,
stalled out.
one building, for goodness sake.
And one of the problems has been finding the money. How do you finance this? So,
Yeah, absolutely. A sad note in White Plains, Jack Harrington, conservation pioneer, died this week. Mr. Harrington has always had a thoughtful and meaningful and respectful opinion and never hesitated to get up in front of the White Plains community and express it. He was 22 years the president of the White Plains Historical Society, chairman of the White Plains Comprehensive Plan Committee way back in the 90s, and he founded the Greenway Committee, which eventually resulted in the establishment of the Jack Harrington Greenway Walking Trail. He had helped to get the Good Counsel Complex on the National Register of Historical Places. He supported the establishment of the White Plains Historic Preservation Law, which has led to the landmarking of the Percy Granger house. He was a gentleman always courtly, concerned, and passionate about preserving White Plains heritage and unique presence. He was to be buried in Oswego, New York.
There was another death this week, this one more of national nature, and that was Roger Ailes, who was the president of Fox News, had to resign in disgrace because of allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment of some of the people.
Right. There's a picture of him as a young man.
Which one is he? Do we know? Oh, you have the arrow pointing to him. Okay, well, he looked quite different when he was running Fox News. Fox News produced a profit. Now, this is a profit of $1 billion a year. Roger Ailes was handsomely paid for what he had done. He, in essence, created a lot of the division in the U.S. by establishing vertical news services where people could tune in and hear only what they wanted to hear. In this case of Fox News, it was right-wing, very right-wing, in fact. Ailes worked for Nixon. He worked for Bush. He was instrumental in getting Richard Nixon to start to sort of like television. The Bushes say that he was instrumental in allowing them to be elected president. To many people who worked at Fox, he was a father figure, nurturing their careers. To others who worked at Fox, he was the devil personified. He will be controversial. He left his mark on broadcasting. He left his mark on all of our lives by, in essence, changing the way we consume news.
Now, he died following a fall in his bathroom
in Florida.
Where he was struck on the back of his head.
Has a home in Florida. He did fall. He went into a coma and passed away. Ailes also had an estate in Garrison, overlooking West Point.
The president's up there. Ran the Putnam County Recorder, I think?
Yes, he had bought that for his wife to run, actually, a local newspaper.
Now, now there was a real derailment again over in Rye this week on this very S-type curve.
Another Metro North accident. They're still working on cleaning up as of this morning, although service was back on it.
This is right alongside the
several
expressway.
cars derailed. Some minor injuries, so we hear, maybe one or two serious.
And that
but
brings to mind
not
a
a
special
disaster.
anniversary.
Well, actually, John, yeah, we do want to catch up on a story that we missed when it came up on May 6th. This past May 6th was the 80th anniversary of the Hindenburg disaster. On May 6th, 1937, the Zeppelin Hindenberg was completing a transatlantic crossing from Frankfurt, Germany, with 97 people on board. The destination was the Lakehurst Naval Air Station in New Jersey. Now, this rigid airship was the pride of the Nazis. It was filled with flammable hydrogen rather than non-flammable helium to create lift, because the U.S. had restrictions on exporting helium and controlled the helium market and refused to sell it to Germany. Thunderstorms delayed the arrival, but around 7 p.m. the airship was cleared to make an approach to Lakehurst. The Hindenburg's flight attracted a lot of attention from newspapers, radio stations, and the newsreels, and Herb Morrison, a reporter for radio station WLS in Chicago, was there with his engineer recording the arrival on a phonograph record for later broadcast. It was 7:25 p.m. on May 6, 1937.
It's starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. Get out of the way. Get it started. It's crashing, and it's crashing. It's crashing terrible. Oh, my. Get out of the way, please. It's burning and bursting into flames, and it's falling on the mooring mast and all the folks between us. This is terrible. This is one of the worst catastrophes in the world. Oh, it's racing 400 or 500 feet into the sky. It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the frame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the prayers are just screaming around it. I told you, I can't talk to people. His friends are on there. I can't talk, ladies and gentlemen. Honest, it's just like that massive smoking wreckage.
Now, 35 of the 97 on board were killed. One worker on the ground also succumbed. The cause has never been determined. Most experts believe leaking hydrogen was ignited by a spark of static electricity. Some suggest the Hindenburg was sabotaged because it was an important propaganda tool for Hitler. The Hindenburg crash brought an end to airships being used for scheduled passenger service. And you know, John, a few years ago, I flew over the Lakehurst Naval Air Station, and the Zeppelin hangars still exist. Absolutely enormous. Even from the air, this was just an enormous structure to house an enormous airship.
And a historic site, actually.
Yeah.
Much like some of the Titanic memorabilia of...
Anyway, so that was in 1937. Today, as we're recording this, we don't have the outcomes yet, but there are two stories you should know about. Check the newspapers over the weekend. The trial of Ramapo Town Supervisor Christopher St. Lawrence has been going on at the federal courthouse here in White Plains. The jury expected to return the verdict today. He's charged with corruption in connection with the financing of a sports stadium. And down in Manhattan, former Congressman Anthony Weiner is expected to plead guilty as we're recording this program in his sexting case. Now, when the FBI seized Weiner's laptop in that investigation, they found Hillary Clinton's emails on his laptop, which led to them reopening the investigation into Clinton's emails, which some believe was responsible for her losing the election.
I know.
Two stories. You'll have to get the outcome for yourselves over the weekend.
Well, another huge unfolding story is what the FCC is doing.
Indeed. They have started to attack what's called net neutrality. Now, this affects everyone who has a computer and uses the internet. It's received very, very little attention, but we're going to give it a little bit of attention here. This net neutrality guarantees equal access to everyone for the internet. It guarantees that when you want to download something or view something on John's website, you'll be able to do it with the same quality, the same speed that you do if you want to view something on the White House website. guarantees equal opportunity for all with respect to the internet. The FCC has started a process to do away with net neutrality. Now, when President Trump took office, he appointed 2 Republicans to the FCC to become FCC commissioners. The Republicans now control the Federal Communications
so you know
Commission.
they're going to swoosh that through.
Net neutrality is something they want to do away with. And they now have to open up this issue to a 4-month public comment period. Turns out that they have already been getting public comments, and an investigation has shown that the comments they've been getting largely have been fake
But they're
comments.
favorable comments.
Favorable comments
They're fake,
saying
folks.
do away with net neutrality. They have received hundreds of thousands of fake comments
Perhaps
on
from Russia.
the FCC's website.
knows?
We don't know. Now, this happened shortly after the FCC took another step, which Republicans have been wanting for years, and that is to do away with ownership restrictions on radio and television stations. That is now going full speed ahead.
So-
The first indication of where they're heading on that happened when they said that there can be a purchase of the Tribune broadcasting stations by another company, and that would give this new company, this other company, 147 stations around the country.
So your media is getting
It's
even
getting more
more
concentrated.
controlled by every day, and it's not good. You can see what it's like down here. Now, without further ado, the episode you wait for every week with bated breath, a truncated Trump the President. Another quiet week.
John, you know, there's so much going on. We could go on for a full half hour, maybe an hour, or
could
as
do
the
a
cable
Trump
networks
today.
do, we can do hours and hours on this. President Trump, as we record this, is getting ready to embark on his first overseas trip with stops in Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Vatican. It's a 9-day trip, but sources report Trump has been dreading it and asked if it could be cut back to only 5 days instead of 9 days, but they're going to do a full 9 days anyway. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller has been appointed special counsel for the Justice Department to oversee the investigation into the Russian connection with the Trump campaign, transition, and individuals, especially the matter of fired Intelligence Chief General Michael Flynn. Acting Attorney General Rosenstein made the appointment. Mueller headed the FBI for 12 years. He has been widely praised across all areas of the political spectrum, except for President Trump, who says he's the victim of a witch hunt, which he called the biggest of any American politician in history. We must remember that witch hunt is the phrase that Nixon used to describe the Watergate investigation.
History repeats itself.
The news agency Reuters has discovered there were 18 previously unreported contacts between the Russians and the Trump people, including 6 involving Michael Flynn. Fired FBI Director James Comey wrote numerous contemporaneous memos detailing meetings and phone calls with President Trump in which Trump tried to get him to shut down the FBI investigations into Flynn and the Russian matters. After he wrote these contemporaneous memos, Comey circulated copies among key FBI staff people, according to the New York Times. The Times reports that key White House advisors have advised President Trump to hire a lawyer to help him deal with whatever might be coming as a result of the investigations. It's pointed out that White House counsel Don McGahn must act as a lawyer for the institution of the White House and not for Trump personally. The new White House National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster now admits that Trump did indeed share classified information with the Russian foreign minister when they met in the Oval Office last week. Paul Manafort, the former Trump campaign manager, is reported under investigation by the Attorney General's office, U.S. Attorney's office, in New York for some real estate dealings involving, among others, buying an apartment at Trump Tower. Preet Bharara, the one who was fired as the U.S.
Yes.
attorney in New York when he refused to resign, apparently had been leading that investigation.
Wow.
President Trump met with President Santos of Venezuela this week and President Erdogan of Turkey. Trump is involved with 2 Trump Towers in Istanbul, Turkey. And Michael Flynn was secretly on the payroll of Turkey.
What a
There
bunch
is-
of turkeys.
There is now a Pence Political Action Committee, believed to be formed with a view to Pence running for president in 2020. We'll see about
Well,
that.
we may get him sooner than that, which would not be, you know, in anybody's best interest.
I'm out of breath.
It does take your breath away, I will admit. And right now, let's go to the beach.
Yeah,
Yes,
the beach.
go to
Everyone was at the
Playland.
beach, and Playland is due to open this weekend.
Yeah, and it was
you know,
really in great shape.
they fixed up the fountain in the court, the main entrance courtyard
Yeah.
up at Playland.
Next
Looks pretty
slide.
nice.
And then they are doing much more work on the North Boardwalk. which
That was
destroyed
destroyed in the
in
storm.
2013.
Right? Yeah.
And so here it is. What is it?
Well,
4
we're,
years
we're,
later.
we're
getting
recording
on
this
that?
on Friday. Tomorrow, Saturday morning, after being delayed from last week because of rain last Saturday. Tomorrow, Saturday at 11 a.m., they have the opening day festivities.
And there's a welcome sign. Welcome to Playland right there. And next shot is Kittyland, my favorite park.
Yeah,
Part of
and
the park. And
Con Edison was doing a drill
Yes.
over at
It's
Playland this
shown
week.
here.
Bunch of Con Ed trucks. They
to
were
prepare for disasters.
preparing for bad storms or whatever
Yeah,
else
this is
might
their-
come up.
This is their staging ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, for that. And then last week, there was a reception at the Percy Granger house right there. It was dedicated as a White Plains landmark. There was about 70 to 75 persons attended. There was a buffet shown here. And this house is a step back in time.
Now, Percy Granger is a noted composer and musician.
Yes.
He had residence here in White Plains. There is a small organization that worked very hard to preserve this and bring it to public attention. And they finally did get some notice, even to the point where now it has been declared an official historic landmark. Now, whether that means that they'll be eligible for funds to
Oh, we
help
hope-
restore and maintain
we
it,
definitely hope so.
we don't know.
And right now,
But part of what they did over there, John, and you were there for that,
right.
was a
played
little
some
music.
tunes. And here is Sandro's at the piano.
You know, John, when I hear that, I can't help thinking of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. I think that was their jingle, wasn't it?
Right, we got a jingle on out of here. John Bailey, Peter Katz, White Plains Week. Good night.
This has been White Plains Week, news and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.